Oh well, what can I do? Um, so again, a bit, just to obviously rehash what I was talking about before. This is the restart of the Beans and Greens podcast. And again, this is basically, a podcast where I'm going to be just kicking shit about different subjects, a lot of conspiracy stuff, some music, all kinds of different things, that I'm into and shit like that. Maybe some gaming here and there, and of course, this is all while, of course, drinking some coffee, and beans, and then, you know, partaking of a bit of the greenery, beans and greens. I'm working to try to get the stream going good. I don't know, for some reason, I'm having all these weird technical difficulties and shit. So, I did a whole stream yesterday, 50 minutes. I'm just sitting there, just kicking the shit, you know, hand gestures, just the whole shebang. And but of course, it wasn't recording at all. Whatever, man. I'll get it together somehow. it just, I don't know. Shit is always kind of like weird. But anyway, a beautiful day to blaze some good would you be? All right. Trying to get everything set up again because you got to streaming on a bunch of different platforms. You got to go through and set it up and for each one. So yeah. All right. So I got making sure I got the kit going right. All right. Just setting it all up. Take me just a second. But yeah, just restarting it all over again, restarting the discussions that I've had before, and hopefully that will. All right, here we go. Yeah, so hopefully I can get more people to discuss these things with me as well. Some of the ideas are the crackpot, but you know, is it is this always supposed to be so on point? just dumb ideas. And one of my main talking points or premises is basically how movies, TV shows, there are certain ones out there where that if you really look at what's going on in the movie, you can see the imprint on what's going on today. It's like as if they predicted. They predict what's going on, and they put it in these movies. And once you start understanding that these these movies represent patterns that you can see going on in actual life, then you start to open your eyes more, and you'll start to see these things, and it start to play out, and it's across all mediums, whether it's movies, music, books, video games. It's across all mediums. Music is another big one. So, and each day, I'm gonna have a different topic. Obviously, since I did a cast yesterday, broadcast yesterday, and nobody heard it, I'm going to just go ahead and continue, and that'll be my topic for today. And I do have some other topics that I'll go on through in future episodes, like tomorrow or later today, depending on what time it is. My time frames is all messed up, but it's all good. I was also working on a new thumbnail. So I've been working on a few things, trying to upgrade things. And like I was mentioning, I don't know if look at the last couple of minutes that I recorded before, I was indicating that, I did have a bit of a hiatus. And in that hiatus, I was able to work a little temporary job that allowed for me to go ahead and upgrade some different things. Like, I was able to actually buy a new guitar. I got some new, electronics that I'm going to use for my music stuff. Got a green screen and shit back there. So, I was definitely upgrading, the podcast and just all my stuff. I figured out what was causing the issue, why I couldn't hear the audio, but, try to put like a voice changer on the computer so that I could, record projects using different voices and shit. And every time I do, it hoses the whole like microphone system. But either way. So, now just to go back to or expound upon what I'm meaning about how the music, movies, all these different mediums, uh, how they sort of basically predict, or in a sense, they sort of, as a lack of a better term, herd the masses into the reality that the creators of these movies specifically want. And they're the obvious movies, like They Live, 1984, Brave New World, and of course, I will definitely go over those. But I think I seen certain patterns, and with those patterns, I sort of want to go in sort of, as sort of an order. Not necessarily the order of how things happen, but the order of how the patterns that I'm seeing in my mind, and sort of how they relate to what's going on into the world. So the first one I'm gonna talk about, and I can put up pictures, and references and things like that. I kind of don't want to, just because of the nature of this. It's for the first one, it's going to be a TV series, right? Now, most of my life I wasn't into like scary movies and shit, but there was a time where I got into some scary movies, and it was always it wasn't the slasher ones. It wasn't like Freddy Krueger or Michael Myers or anything like that. It was all the demon possession ones, like The Exorcist. A crazy story. I was I was chilling with some friends in my old crib like mad years ago, and I was like, "Yo, want to watch Exorcist? It's a crazy movie." And I didn't have it at the time, but I did see it before. So I was like, "Hey, let me find it and try to download it." I couldn't find it anywhere, and I finally found it, and I went to download the damn movie, and my whole computer just went poof, and shut off right in the middle of it. As a matter of fact, even the electricity in the whole apartment went out. So we did end up downloading and watch the movie, but yeah, I think there are some consequences for watching shit like that. Because if you understand that these things send off an energy, even if it's just a movie, this movie's the energy behind it, you know, it can lead to some real world consequences. I mean, you hear the stories of when they made, was it the Passion of Christ? There were some questionable things that went on with that, and they were talking about Jesus, shit like that. So, yeah, there's definitely something there with that. But so Exorcist is what I'm talking about, but not the movies, not the prequels, the sequels, and all the side movies made about that, but the actual TV series. And the TV series is basically about an excommunicated priest who was actually contacted by another priest who's trying to become an exorcist, and he's getting a lot of pushback, from the Vatican because of all of the different things going on now. If you know anything about this, the exorcisms and all the demon possessions, it always sort of seems to come from Catholic churches. And the thing about that is now, me myself, I was actually raised Catholic. Not for most of us, it's Christian, but and for us, especially being that, on my mom's side of the family, they were from, her 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 mom, my grandmom, was from Trinidad. My grandfather's here, but my grandmother's from Trinidad. And a lot of the countries, a lot of the people in those island nations, they actually lean more Catholic. So, going to Catholic school, and I lived back in actually in Brooklyn, and it was a Catholic school right in the middle of. It was it was weird because it was a combination of a Jewish neighborhood on one side, and then it was an Italian neighborhood on the other side. And it was Bensonhurst was it's right on the cusp of Bensonhurst. You know, yeah, Bensonhurst Borough Park. If you're from there, you know. But back in the '80s, though, that's when I was there. So that was oof, a long time ago. And you know, one thing I've noticed from going to church and going to school, with the Catholic Church, there are a lot of rituals. It's a very very ritualistic type of religion. I mean, they all are really, and it's. I mean, the ritualistic nature of this sort of it seems to invite or evoke sort of spirits and things going on that hell I even went to as a youngster, I went to it was and this is in upstate New York. It was a sleepaway camp. It was a Catholic military style sleepaway camp. So how that works, we would meet at the Port Authority in Manhattan. We'd have a list of like things we need because we're generally going out there to camp, and so we'd have all this camping equipment. Meet at the Port Authority, ride upstate. Then we'd get to this campsite, and you'd have these big tents, and it's basically what we would do is we would be in each of these tents, and you get like I would say about 10 people, 5 on each side of a tent, and you have your sleeping bag on the floor, and then you're basically sleeping on this hardwood floor. And these were basically your like your barracks, and we were all basically like in this was like you were in the military. We were given those wooden guns, and we had uniforms, and we had patches, and we had ranks, and it was just basically like a military. And every morning we would get up to like the sounds of from a bugle, and we'd all line up in like our little, I forgot what they call, like platoons or whatever. Did the inspection, just like the shit you see in the movies. But obviously we weren't in boot camp, but it was that style. And then we go to church on Sundays. And I noticed because I was altar boy in church a lot. I was always with the incense. I don't know what that means for. Because I incense, smoke herbs, all that, whatever. It's definitely no Diddy-ish going on, but I was involved with this stuff. I was a believer, but it was sometimes it was a little off-putting. I'm not even gonna front. The rituals themselves, I don't know. I can recall now that the environment that we're going through in this school, and in this whole entity called the Catholic Church, it was a little bit different. First off, when you go to church on Sundays, number one, you sit, you stand, you kneel, you stand, you sit, you kneel, and this is all done in what they call the pew. I've done the whole spiel. I got the first Holy Communion and confirmation, all of that. I've had. I was in it. I was in it, and you understand, as you get older, how influential and how much the church is ingrained everywhere. So now to my premise and how this sort of comes together. So basically, these movies, these television shows, they all have a storyline which, if you recognize, is actually going on in actual life today. So in this show, the Exorcist TV show, we're starting off again, like I mentioned, you have the excommunicated priest and excommunicated priest, and then the priest who's trying to become an exorcist, and he contacts the excommunicated priest to show him how. And one of the scenes that happens, and it's really scary, is you have all these really influential higher up clergies, like cardinals and bishops, and stuff starts happening to these people. I think it was even like higher like cops that are higher rank, the kind of cops that basically move other cops around, and you don't ever see them because they have too many patches, all these really high up and influential people. And these people were being taken over by demonic souls or demonic beings. That's the premise of what's going on. So you have a couple of storylines in this series, because you have the priest and the excommunicated priest coming together so they can go after these demonic, these demon possessed people, because they were actually going and helping just regular everyday people. So the thing with the clergy and the higher up, that was a separate theme. But what's happening is now, there's this proliferation of demonic beings taking over all these different people, and now they're in the most influential places. And see how that's significant as far as what we're dealing with in life today, in actuality. I mean, you look at the past two administrations, right? And I say two because obviously one of them was doubled up. Now with the one that we're currently in the previous one, it's what's happening. It's pretty much par for course. Honestly, it was like this the first time. It was the same storylines, the same political upheaval. I mean, it's a little more ratcheted up now, and there's a lot more deaths now, which, whatever, man. I mean, it's makes no sense, but it was the same thing. So there was no difference, and it's still my premise about the TV show. It still applies, and I'm going to go over that in just a moment. But then we've gotten into we got into the Biden administration, and see, if you want to affect change in society, right? You don't. It's not like you have to. It's not like you have to get everybody or a bunch of people at one time, or how you do it, because we are. I'll put it. This is a better way to put it. How you push for political change. If you're the people behind the scenes and you have an agenda and you want to affect this agenda, how you do it is by positioning few people, in places of power and places of high influence, and have them push the agenda. And being that we are easily programmable, it's not hard. It's just repetition. Just hammer the same things every day. Feed into whether it's their fears, their lusts, greed, whatever it is. You can feed into that, and then you can use that. Now, as it relates to the show, you had these demons taking over these bodies of these influential people, and I just can't. I can't look at what happened, especially going back to that administration, because it wasn't just certain agendas that they were pushing, whether it was gender or racial. It was also with the jab, and it was just sort of crazy that you had these sort of blank, hollow people, and we saw them on TV every day. We heard them on the news. We heard him on the radio. We heard it. Shit, on the website, on the web. It was such a proliferation of these messages of these different agendas on a regular basis, and it was always just these few influential people. So my premise is basically that, honestly, with such evil messages and ideologies, that were counter to human, to what being a human is, and I can't say with that 100% that these people were possessed by demons, but the stuff that they pushed was just so anti-human, and this stuff is still being pushed now. We can go into specifics, which I mean, I'm not, but it's just anybody that had gone through these times that we went through, especially. I mean, honestly, it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on, right? It doesn't matter what you believe in. Everybody felt something in some way, as far as being pushed or herded into these realities, and it was always these influential people, people that we look to. Even in even some cases, it was people that we had no idea of before these genders, but because they were who were selected to push it, that's who we saw every day, and it was repetition. Like I said, repetition every day to push the message. Then eventually, that message becomes part of your psyche, and now it's the reality. It doesn't take long because you know people were already fearful. People were already easily able to be swayed one way or the other. Haven't had dealt going all the way back to 9/11. I mean, I saw it, and it's still even then that whole premise of these demonic beings taking over these souls and these or the bodies of these influential people. I can even see it going back to 9/11 because again it was these people, these few influential people, and every time you look at these people, they're soulless. It looks there's no actual life in in their eyes. It's they're robotic in their delivery, and it was the same process because when I say that process, I mean every day the same message, and as news goes, each different news channel, they'll have a segment, and it'll be like 10, 15 minutes from one news broadcaster or news reader. Then they'll have another segment, another news reader, but the message is still the same. It may be the wording may be different, but the message is still being the same, and it's going to be across all the channels, and every day and every day, every day. Then, now we're basically open and manipulable. Is that a word? Manipulable? Easily to manipulate. It's manipulable. I'm actually better because I was sick for the past few days, struggling to, you know, but it's better every day. But I would have been better sooner if I just stopped. But whatever, I'm an asshole. So if you look at it, who's running the show? Who's running the asylum? I mean, there's so much, and this is of course the tinfoil moment, but there are a lot of conspiracy theories towards all of these people that are running the show and their ritual practices in the background, and this goes back to my original sort of talking points are sort of about the church that I was a part of. It being ritual in nature, as far as the practices and how, again, and it goes back to the repetitious thing because every Sunday it's the same message. Maybe they have different scriptures. Then you kneel, sit down. I mean, you kneel, stand up, sit down, kneel. That to me is more of a thing of, again, mental control, compliance. It's because you're getting all these people at one time. At one time doing the same movements, reading the same scriptures, singing the same songs. And again, if you know anything about songs and music, these things that we call songs and movies and all these different things, these different mediums, entertainment. And in a sense, yeah, but not in how most people would think about it, right? most people would think about it in the sense of this has helped me pass the time. This is this is for me to have a good time and hang with the friends and yeah, that's part of it. That's really small part of it. That's just like what television was invented for people to see the TV, as opposed to, them to being able to put ads into your face every day. See, so it's the same basic concept. That's not exactly what it's about. So with entertainment, it's basically, we have these ideas and these thoughts that we want you to entertain. So here's it in music form, here's it in video form, here's it in video game form, here's it in comic books and books and just all the different mediums. And we want you to entertain that, and you're gonna see it every day, and it's gonna get into your psyche, and it's gonna be and these things with as far as music and this is a vibratory frequency, right? So as you listen to these things, you're not only listening audibly, but you're taking it in as far as part of your being because you are also a vibratory being as well. So when they can connect that vibratory frequency to you, then you now are more suggestible, right? So if you're these monolithic beings in the background that are controlling things, what you want to do is put your agents out there in order to affect these areas of control. And if you are in a demonic monolithic being that's controlling everything, you're going to send all your demons, into the most influential bodies in order to be able to affect the agenda. So, and again, like I mentioned before, once you start noticing the patterns and start noticing, the intricacies, then you can apply it to any time in history. Because, I mean, for me, with each administration, there was always something that, at least as far as going from Bush, because that was when I was old enough to really recognize what was going on. When I was younger, I was like, I heard the news, I heard these different things were going on, but I never really put two and two together. So as now being older, I'm able to make sense of all the different political ideas and different stories and things like that. Of course, I'm still coming from a mind that of being sort of herded to believe one sort of values, right? And we all are sort of put in a different category. So the information comes out, we accept it differently. So each administration seemed like it was set to affect a specific part, of the political, social fabric of the country and basically the world. And then you had, the first Bush, well, not the first one, but the Bush during 9/11. Obviously he was set to bring in the beginnings of this new sort of way of thinking, right? Then things were so screwed up. There was sort of there was this anger across the country. There was this sort of spirit across the country that would seem that if it was if managed correctly, could have affected great political, social, financial change in the country towards the positive for us as a whole, all the communities, right? But then we have, the Obama administration, and Then we get apathy, right? Of course, you get apathy, and you get the calming down of that spirit. Plus, you get the initiation, or not initiation, but you get in sort of the beginnings of certain agendas, and they're pushing these agendas forward. They're not pushing, forward the country as a whole, right? And then you have disastrous BLM. You have all these different breakdowns in society based off of controlled. These were, in my opinion, these were controlled, like protests and sort of this was basically controlled opposition to the ruling class. We follow along like sheep, and the underlying message, or the underlying control was not for our of these events. It wasn't for our benefit, but it was further to erode some sort of political, social ideology and certain things within this country, right? Then you have, Trump, and it was such a reaction, opposite reaction to the previous administration, and there was a lot of devastation. I went through a lot in that administration. Then the Biden, right, and that was another one that was very devastating. That administration was it was the most crucial in eroding social norms, right? And it was very sort of radical and militant. Then now you forward now to the second Trump. Now it's the same thing, but in opposition to the previous, and it's just as radical. It's just as dogmatic, and just to use more brilliant words. But in each of those periods, there was always a set of people that you would always see, and again, it was more on a repetitious basis that we would see these people, and they would push these narratives. And then, of course, you got celebrity culture, where it was the same thing with it was crazy because each time that one of these sort of events went on, you had the same celebrities, and they always seemed to be, a part of the cause, part of the fight. Of course, you had your ones that were against it, and they always showed up in the same media. And then each time period was the same thing. So what this TV show, if anybody watched it and was able to put together what was going on, you could see that how the world can be moved and be changed by just a few influential people, right? Or these people being, in my opinion, taken over by demonic souls, or demonic beings. Now, of course, I could be wrong. I would love to believe I'm wrong, but I mean, just go back and look at. If you can go back and look at, if you go back and look at like news interviews and just any kind of medium from these different time periods, you'll see the people that are pushing these ideologies and how people reacted and people enforced, these realities, these things. It was. You can't tell me that there was not this sort of. I mean, I have to say, such a demonic sort of push towards these ideologies. I mean, it's crazy. And see, it's funny because it's not a matter of going to each person and saying you got to be this, right? Again, you get the few influential people, and then what they do is they play upon the masses, right? Because the herd will regulate the herd, right? So, like, quick side, whenever you saw, like, if anybody watched, what was that shit with Caesar Milan, the Dog Whisperer, right? Whenever there was an unruly dog, or whenever there was, a dog that they couldn't control, what did they do? They brought another dog in order to get that dog in line, right? So, and what you have in life, how that equates in life is now you have these influential people pushing these agendas using the media and these mediums such as, like I said, movies, music, uh, games, internet, things like that, to influence the masses. And then the masses will turn around and police those of us or those who don't follow, the order of the day, the social order. And it's crazy. It's like if you're looking at the movies and you see, especially ones where there's like perfect example, Constantine, which is going to be another movie. It's going to be part of the discussion. In that movie, you had scenes where you had a bunch of people that were taken over by souls, demonic souls, and this is honestly how when you look at this is how these people. I mean, I never forgot during that time. He ended up going to the hospital, ended up getting major surgery, and I remember how I got caught up in it is because I was feeling like shit for a while, and I remember just the sentiment. It's like, if you don't get this, and this, you have no right to go to the emergency room. And they were like, people were going to the emergency room that were sick and, never came home. So I'm like, and I pretty much almost never even made it to the hospital to be able to come home. So, I walked in the hospital, and it was packed with people that were sick. But, walked in there by myself, was told that you have this, and this. And it's like, we put you in the room. I got put in the room right away when I walked in the hospital. And they did a little testing, and they're like, yeah, we need to do X. We did X right up, like 2-3 days later, So now I'm sitting at home recovering, and I'm watching everything that's going on, and it was the same demonic faces that we saw every day. And you can't tell me there wasn't something to that. And how, they were able to basically herd society. And it wasn't even just into actually doing the jab. It was the whole thing of, you don't have a right to go into a store if you don't take this, or you don't have a right to go into the emergency room if you don't have X, Y, and Z. You don't have a right to this, you don't have a right to that if you don't do this. Which is counter to being in a free country, right? I mean, people still pull that bullshit, or push that bullshit. The free country. Yeah. Free country, my ass. So I can talk more shit, but being that the whole idea of this particular series is to highlight, the movies that you can definitely see what's going on. Being that that's going to be the premise, going forward, it's going to be, like I said, it's going to be in sort of an order, right? Sort of there's an order or a pattern in my mind that will dictate what comes next. And in the previous iteration of the podcast, I would do like a bunch of different videos into one episode. But I think that I should go down the line and go down make one episode each video, or each video one episode, and then go into the reasons why. So that's basically what I'm going to do. So as the pattern that I'm talking about, as I see it, one of the most central movies, and you can sort of imprint or see the imprint in society and what's going on in society from this movie. It's going to be for the next episode, and it's going to be Star Wars, and not the first three. The first three, starting in 1977, that was a result of the second three. So the second three sort of shows the plot that brought on the events of the first three. I mean, they sort of went backwards and stuff. So it's pretty wild. Sort of it has your minds going backwards and forwards. It's really, because if you think about it, there are people like from us. We'll read a book, we'll open it up, and we'll go left to right. But there are places where they read right to left, right? So that's sort of what the way they did this the Star Wars movie. It sort of gets you to read from right to left. But once I go over it, then you'll be able to see how this movie also fits that whole mold of being part of, or it's basically the controllers, those that are in the shadows that shall not be named. They basically saying, this is what we're doing to you, and this is how we're doing it, and we're gonna show it to you and present it to you. And of course, we're gonna throw in some fantasy shit, motherfuckers in tights and laser guns and spaceships and lightsabers and James Earl Jones' deep voice, but there are some serious hidden meanings in that movie. Just as with The Exorcist, it can be dismissed as entertainment. Again, it's to entertain these ideas in your mind, right? And The Exorcist, because of the name, the Exorcist TV series, because of the name itself, right? You always sort of go back to the original movie, and you can miss those patterns in there. So the idea is to go beyond, the surface, to be able to pull those patterns out of that and then apply it to society today. So, as I've done that with the Exorcist series, I'm definitely going to break it down with the Star Wars. And I may be able to put some visuals and things as well. So I don't want it just to be just that in the background, and then, at least as far as with Exorcist goes, it was all going to be gory. Not totally into that, but Star Wars, I'm going to see if it's okay. I'm not going to put any actual audio or video from it, just maybe some stills. And I'll as I'm talking about the specific subjects, I'll be able to put that still up. So that'll be next week. Tomorrow I have a whole different thing, and I'll go over that obviously tomorrow. But yeah. So I think I got this recorded with no issues. This should have full audio, and my voice sounds a little bit dry, but yeah. So anyway, the day is long, the sun is hot. Might as well smoke if you got some pot. I'm out.